Ever get this feeling like you're just seeing the tip of the iceberg? That's what I get with Ted Bundy.
Uh-huh.
Man, yeah, we're diving into that Ted Bundy. But it's not just the crimes, horrifying as they were. It's the man underneath. Like, how does someone who seemed so normal become that? You've said a ton of stuff on Bundy, biographies, psychology papers, even courtroom transcripts. So let's unpack this. What makes him so endlessly fascinating, even decades later?
It's the unsettling ordinariness, really. Bundy just shattered this image people had of what a serial killer looks like. He wasn't some outcast lurking in the shadows. He was charming, smart, blended in effortlessly, which honestly made him even more dangerous.
Right, almost like a chameleon, changing to fit in wherever he needed to be. But even chameleons start somewhere, right? You mentioned his childhood was unusual, even before we get to, well, everything else.
It's true, Bundy's early life was just marked by secrecy, this distorted family structure. He grows up thinking his grandparents are his parents and his mom is his sister. Imagine the impact of that on a child, on their sense of identity, their place in the world.
Wow. Yeah, to have that as your normal, it's like the ground is already shaky.
Yeah.
And there's this other story, right? Something about Bundy as a kid putting knives around his aunt's bed, but like with this eerie smile. That's not your average kid prank, right?
Exactly. This goes way beyond mischief. It suggests what psychologists call instrumental aggression. Instead of acting out of anger, it's about control. Think of a bully who hurts not because they're mad, but to establish dominance. Seeing that in childhood, it can be a huge red flag, an early sign of someone who needs to control their environment, even if it means harming others.
Okay, yeah, that's already giving me chills. So we've got this kid with a messed up family situation, possibly showing early signs of needing control. Fast forward, he's in college, law school even, dating. Outwardly, a pretty normal guy. How on earth did he hide what was going on underneath?
That's where Bundy's real danger lay. He was a master manipulator. Think about it. Charisma, intelligence. Those weren't just traits, they were tools. He used them to build this entirely believable persona. Like he was reading social cues, expectations, and playing them, like a virtuoso. It wasn't just fitting in, it was a calculated tactic to deflect any suspicion.
It's almost like he was living a double life. One side, this charming law student, the other. Well, we know how that side went. Did he ever feel conflicted? Was there any remorse, any struggle within him?
See, that's the hallmark of psychopathy. It's not just being evil, it's a lack of empathy, of genuine remorse. It's this ability to separate their actions from who they believe they are. This allows them to function normally, have relationships, a career, all while committing horrific acts without the guilt or emotional turmoil most people would feel.
Both fascinating and terrifying. So with Bundy, are we saying this was all calculated? There was no real emotion behind it?
Yeah.
Just a carefully crafted persona and a plan?
It's more complex than that. There are layers to Bundy, like anyone, right? But a key layer is this need for control, which, yeah, definitely played out in his crimes. He wasn't driven by some random frenzy, but by this meticulously crafted fantasy.
Okay, so let's talk about those crimes, as difficult as that is. What we see with Bundy is this terrifying pattern. He targets young women, often with long, dark hair, parted in the middle, almost like they fit a type. And he used disguises, fake injuries, even pretended to be an authority, all to gain their trust.
That's the control manifesting. Choosing victims who fit a specific profile, meticulously planning the abduction. It's all about exerting power over the situation, over another human being. This wasn't chaotic violence, it was calculated. A way for him to live out a script only he had written.
God, it's chilling. Like something out of a nightmare, the idea that someone could be so deliberate. And then there's that detail about Bundy revisiting the graves of his victims, sometimes for days. That's a level of darkness I can barely even comprehend.
This ties into the escalation of his fantasies, I think. Control, for Bundy, wasn't enough. It had to go beyond death. It's a disturbing manifestation of his need to dominate, to possess, even when life is gone. This was about crossing boundaries. Boundaries most people can't even fathom.
And, as horrifying as all this is, there's also the fact that he got away with it. For a while anyway. With such meticulous planning, how did Bundy eventually get caught?
Ironically, I think his downfall was fueled by the very traits that helped him evade capture for so long. His arrogance and his belief that he was always the smartest guy in the room.
Right.
Remember that narcissistic personality? It eventually led to reckless decisions.
Like when he decided to act as his own lawyer.
Exactly.
Talk about confidence, right? It's almost unthinkable, someone committing such awful crimes and then believing they can charm their way out of it in a courtroom.
Exactly. He underestimated the legal system, overestimated his ability to manipulate it. He was playing a dangerous game, and eventually, well, it caught up with him. The justice system, thankfully, doesn't run on charm alone.
No, thankfully not. And the world is definitely a safer place without Ted Bundy in it. But here's the thing. He was executed decades ago, 1989 to be exact, yet his case still fascinates, even horrifies people today. Why is that? What makes him different from other serial killers?
Bundy shattered this preconceived notion of what a serial killer was. Before him, there wasn't this widespread awareness that a seemingly normal person, someone you might even know or befriend, could be capable of such brutality.
It's like the mask was ripped off, and people couldn't believe what was underneath. Did his case change how law enforcement approached these kinds of investigations?
Absolutely. Bundy forced a complete rethink of criminal profiling. They couldn't rely on the stereotype of the loner, the obvious, creepy guy. It meant looking beyond appearances, understanding the psychology of these individuals, something that wasn't always given priority.
So it's not enough to just chase the crime. You have to understand the mind of the criminal committing it. Which brings us back to something you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Psychopathy. We've touched on some of the traits, the lack of empathy, the manipulation. But for those of us who aren't experts, can you break it down? What is psychopathy exactly?
It's a complex personality disorder, and importantly, it doesn't automatically equal violent criminal. Many people with psychopathic traits live perfectly ordinary lives, often in positions of power, believe it or not.
Really? I think most people, myself included, probably do equate psychopathy with violence.
Right. It's a common misconception. While a lack of empathy, disregard for rules, manipulativeness are all hallmarks, violence isn't a given. What made Bundy so dangerous was the combination of these traits with sadism.
Sadism meaning he derived pleasure from inflicting pain.
Exactly. It wasn't just about silencing victims like with some killers. For Bundy, the violence, the control, the suffering inflicted, it was all part of the fantasy he'd carefully constructed.
Which brings us back to those fantasies and how they escalated. You mentioned his early exposure to violent pornography might have played a role.
It's a complex issue. Bundy himself talked about violent pornography's effect on him, how it fueled his desires, desensitized him to violence.
So it's more nuanced than just saying violent media creates violent people.
Much more. It's the interplay of individual vulnerabilities, personality, and outside factors. While we can't draw a direct line, it's a factor to consider, especially with young minds still developing.
It's a chilling reminder that what we consume, especially at a young age, can have a profound impact on our thoughts and behaviors.
Absolutely. And in Bundy's case, those dark fantasies manifested in the most horrific ways imaginable.
It's almost like we're trying to put together a puzzle, but some pieces are missing. We see the horrific picture he created, but the full picture, his true motivations, might always be a mystery. It's unsettling, to say the least. We can analyze his childhood, his psychology, try to trace the roots of those fantasies, but ultimately, some parts of his mind, his motivations, they remain a black box.
And that's actually what makes his case, and others like it, so crucial for anyone studying criminal psychology, Every case, even decades later, might offer new insights, new avenues for research, and hopefully ways to prevent such tragedies from happening again.
So it's not just about understanding the darkness that was Ted Bundy, but maybe preventing another Bundy from emerging. If we can recognize warning signs, patterns of behavior, could we intervene earlier?
Precisely. It's about picking up on those red flags, not just in potential perpetrators, but also creating a society that's more attuned to violence against women, to the impact of what we consume, the importance of mental health. It's about addressing those societal cracks that someone like Bundy could exploit.
So it's about more than just catching the criminal after the fact. It's about building a world where those crimes are less likely to even happen in the first place. That's a heavy but important takeaway.
Absolutely. And as horrifying as Bundy's case is, we should never lose sight of the victims. They were real people with lives, dreams, families. Their story should be at the forefront, not just the gruesome details or the psychology of their killer.
Well said. It's a reminder that behind every headline, every true crime podcast, there are real human lives forever changed by these events. So as we wrap up this particularly heavy deep dive, I think the message is this. Be kind to one another. Be aware of your surroundings, and never, ever hesitate to speak up if something feels wrong. And if this conversation has brought up any difficult emotions for you, please reach out for help. You can find resources in our show notes, or talk to a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional. Until next time, take care.